Have you ever wanted untold magical powers, but studying for them sounds way too nerdy for you? Not enough of a theater kid for bardic arts? Not enough of a nepo baby for sorcery? Well, Warlock might just be the class for you. Warlock is the most evocative class in D&D when it comes to roleplay, giving both you and your DM amazing plot hooks to create a story for your character. So why are they so... boring? I'm Antonio D'Amico, this is Pointy Hat, and we're gonna answer that question in this episode of D&D with a twist, Warlock Edition. So when I think of Warlocks, I think of...
Escucha las palabras de las brujas, los secretos escondidos en la noche, los antiguos dioses invocamos ahora.
Warlocks are the class for sugar babies and those that think all the other casters are not edgy enough for them. Instead of working out at the library or learning how to paint with all the colors of the wind, Warlocks no-clip out of bounds of arcane tradition and speedrun their way to being a full caster. Asterisk next to full caster, we'll get into it. Warlocks don't get their magic through main character syndrome like sorcerers or by actually working for it like bards and wizards, but by making a pact with... something. In terms of gameplay, Warlocks are build. They are sold to you as the Build-A-Bear class of all Build-A-Bear classes, with not just your choice of subclass, but your choice of Eldritch Invocation and Pact Boon. Warlocks are extremely customizable and offer many options to build your character. In theory. Yes, as you can tell, this is where I have a problem with them. But there's 1,000 things I think that Warlock does better than any class. So let's get deep into Warlocks. Well, no, not like that. I mean, whatever. Let's talk abilities. So Warlocks are full casters. Just kidding, they're not. Just kidding, they are. Just kidding, it doesn't matter. Fun fact for those that are D&D YouTube poisoned, like me, full caster is not even a thing in D&D 5e. It's a thing that people that play the game use as a term to have civilized and edifying arguments on Reddit. So whether Warlocks count as full casters depends on how you define them, because Warlocks are different from any other spellcasting class. Very different. They are not like other casters. They love beer and pizza and sports, and they also literally don't have the spellcasting ability. They have Pact Magic instead. Pact Magic is what makes Warlocks not like the other casters. Instead of having normal spell progression, Warlocks get like 2.5 spell slots ever. I'm kidding, kinda. Warlocks get significantly less than other classes that are considered full casters, while wizards, bards, druids, and sorcerers have 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2 ones by level 3, say that 3 times fast, for a total of 6 spell slots. Warlocks have, one sec, let me crunch the numbers, yeah, they have 2. Warlocks get significantly less spell slots, only going up to 3 total spell slots at level 11. Yep, 11. Have fun. To mitigate this, Warlocks regain all their spell slots on a short rest and not on a long rest like the other classes. Oh, you mean like the Wizard's Arcane Recovery? Shh. Don't say that out loud. You'll make the Warlocks player sad again. Don't listen, sweetie. The size of your spell slot list doesn't matter. It's what you do with it. And Warlocks overcompensate for their small spell slots by blasting their magic all over the place the moment they cast it. I'm having way too much fun with this. Warlocks don't choose at what level they cast the spell. They simply cast it at the highest possible spell slot level all the time. This means that they benefit the most out of spells that either remain active for a long time, like summons, or scale in damage and effect by spell level. So that's the bread and butter of Warlocks and their signature ability. But as I said before, this is the Build-A-Bear class to beat all Build-A-Bear classes. So of course they'll get 1,000 things to pick from, namely Eldritch Invocations. Let's talk about them. But in order to put any Eldritch Invocation to use in combat, you need, wanna guess? I bet you won't, because it's so important and so crucial to gameplay, it might not even come to your head right now. You need a map, a battle map, or your DM does. Did you know there are people out there that specialize in making maps like you've never seen? Some cartographers are content with duplicating what already exists in the world on parchment, but there are others that don't stop there. With magically loaded ink and ley-weaved parchment, they go beyond portraying and actually create completely new spaces. Through expert brushstrokes, legendary cartographers conjure from their own imagination impossible scenes, from underwater palaces to tax agencies in the depths of hell. The most famed of these cartographers being none other than the 2 that have created more than 4,000 of these impossible locations. Their name? Cheipeku. That's right, I'm impossibly proud to say I get to talk about Cheipeku because I've used their maps before I had a YouTube channel at all. Cheipeku is a Patron that gives you access to, in my opinion, some of the best maps for D&D or Pathfinder or anything. For $5 a month, you get, as I said, more than 4,000 of these. 4,000, and they range from stuff you will always need, like roads and cities, to truly incredible stuff that might spark a whole encounter or adventure just by how beautiful the map is. You are bound to find either the thing you're looking for or something that inspires you and brings your tabletop games into the next level. And I'm really talking next level. Maps come with variations for seasons, time of day, weather effects, everything for each of the maps, so you can use them whenever. Not only that, but some of these maps are actually animated. Imagine the immersion of pulling that up on a VTT, or printing any of the non-animated ones for IRL play. And talking about immersion, they also have a completely separate Patron for scenes. Not battle maps, but scenes that you can pull up for ambience and to increase that immersion. So now all those exploration and talking scenes that take hours to play also get incredible immersive visuals. So whether you are a DM in need of maps or scenes, or a player that wants to get your DM a belated Christmas present, go check out their Patreon below. It's the first link in the description. And now that we have a map to actually play our Warlock on, let's get right back into Eldritch Invocations. As a Warlock studies occult lore, which is code for cosplaying a wizard, Warlocks learn Eldritch Invocations. You get 2 at 2nd level and keep gaining more as you go up in levels, and they are really fun. They're extremely varied. Some mitigate the Warlock's basically no spell slots problem, some change the way you play completely, and some make the class less fun. But all of them have that good edgy coat of paint that all Warlock players love. Let's look at some. Armor of Shadows allows you to cast magic armor on you at will. No spell slot required, making you a bit less squishy. Eldritch Mind gives you advantage on concentration checks, so you don't have to take the Warcaster feat as a hexblade. This is it. This is the one. Use this one. Take this one. This is a good one. Mask of Many Faces allows you to play as Magic James Bond and cast Disguise Self at will. Beguiling Influence makes you hotter, giving you proficiency in deception and persuasion skills, and reminding you that this is indeed a charisma-based class, in case you forgot. Nothing more charismatic than being Cthulhu's sugar baby. And those are some Eldritch Invocations. There are a ton of them, and most of them are super flavorful, allowing you to really give your Warlock a unique vibe to fit the idea you have of them in your head. Oh, what's that? I haven't talked about the good ones. The ones that make your Eldritch Blast better. Oh, don't worry. I'm getting to it. But the pick and choose aspect of Warlock doesn't end with Eldritch Invocations. It only starts there and continues with a Warlock's Pact Boon. A Pact Boon is basically a second subclass, like a baby one. You choose between 4 options, and these really change how you play your Warlock, so listen up. You pray to the sugar daddy of mystical power you have decided to lend your soul to for God knows what reason, and in return, he gives you a boon. Pact of the Blade turns you into an anime character complete with magical sword of darkness and pain. Any anime abilities a weapon could have, your pact weapon has. You are super mega proficient with it, it's magical so you can hit ghosts with it, and get this, you can summon it to your hand from whatever pocket dimensions anime weapons go to when the protagonist summons them out of their hand. This is for a very specific subsection of players, but God does it hit just right for the people that want this. Pact of the Tome allows you to further cosplay as a wizard and kinda sorta mitigates your micro spellcasting issue. You can pick 3 extra cantrips from any spell list and cast them at will, as long as you don't return that book to whatever library you stole it from. This gives you more cantrips than basically any other caster though, so you can stick it to him. Who's the best spellcaster now, huh? Who said you need higher education? And the other 2 are, in technical terms, worse. Pact of the Chain gives you a slightly more powerful familiar. You get the spell to summon it, and you can cast it as a ritual, which, I mean, you still need the components, but at least it won't take one of your 2 spell slots. The familiar you can cast is stronger than like the chicken, rat, or octopus the normal find familiar allows you to cast, giving you access to an imp, a pseudo-dragon, a quasit, or a tinkerbell. And they certainly can be useful in combat, kinda, for lower levels, but their usefulness is gonna sharply decline the moment monsters get up there in CR, at which point it's just basically just as useful as any other familiar. Honestly, only pick this if you really love it and there is no wizard in the party, or the wizard just doesn't cast Find Familiar. For some reason, it's one of the best spells they got, but anyway. And finally, Pact of the Talisman. Yes, I know you forgot about this one, and for good reason. This gives you guidance, allowing you to add a d4 to a failed ability check. Yes, only to you. And also, it's somehow capped to your proficiency bonus. A worse version of a cantrip. Cool! So you could take this, or, hear me out, take Pact of the Tome and just pick Guidance. Something you can cast as many times as you want and on other people other than you. And if you tell me that the fact that it doesn't require a verbal or somatic component to cast makes it worth it, I'm just gonna banish you for being a liar and a contrarian. You know it doesn't make up for it. Moving on. Okay, so that's all Warlock ability. What? There's more? Okay, no, we gotta speed this up. Hey, everybody, lightning round, now.
Lightning round.
Ability score improvement. It improves your ability scores. Neat, moving on. Eldritch versatility, an optional ability. Bars. It's basically a respec. Whenever you get an ability score improvement, you can switch out a cantrip, return to the store the packed boon that your sugar daddy got you, and get a different one because he's old and doesn't understand that you're going for the clean girl aesthetic, or change a spell you got through Mystic Arcanum. What's that? Mystic Arcanum at level 11. You have proved your talents as an elite class sugar baby, and you are bestowed with one 6th level spell. You can now cast this 6th level spell once without using a spell slot, and then it's time to mimir until you can cast it in this way again. If you didn't get extra spells to cast this way at levels 13, 15, and 17. And the 17th one is a 9th level spell. Cool ability. Shame it comes literally after most campaigns end. And those are all the Warlock's abilities. As you can see, the class is structured around choice, and Warlocks as a result end up feeling extremely different from one another. Or they should be. But their abilities are not the only reason why Warlocks feel so customizable and unique. It's their subclasses. So why don't we take a look at those? All Warlock subclasses are based on who their patron is. As we covered, Warlocks get their magic by making a pact with something. And what that something is determines their subclass. This makes it so that Warlocks get possibly the most flavorful subclasses that influence the character the most out of, yeah, all the classes honestly. So let's take a look at what these have in store for our potential sucrose infants. First off, the OG, the blueprint, the pink print, the goat? Not really. It's the fiend. If the whole make a pact with a thing for untold power sounds a lot like what devils do on the regular, you are correct. The Warlock's poster boy is the Pact of the Fiend, and Fiend does cover not just devils but also demons and the other ones nobody really cares about. Making a pact with a devil is such an iconic story structure, and it has been done 1,000 times for a reason. It's exciting, it's fun, it incorporates tons of drama, and basically gives your DM a ready-made antagonist with a deep connection to one of the players from the word go. It's cool. But what does Pact of the Fiend give us in terms of abilities? Well, it's the fire type of the Warlock subclass, with spells like Burning Hands, Scorching Ray, and the ever-present and meme to death and back. Other than fire, you get stuff like Dark One's Blessing, which makes it so that you gain temp HP when you steal kills from your party members. Real talk, I understand the impulse of designing abilities like these, but I think they more often than not lead to bad behaviors at the table, like everyone waiting around so that the Warlock can kill the guy or whatever. Don't love it. Dark One's Own Luck is also there, and it allows you to go cry to your demonic sugar father whenever things don't go your way. As in, whenever you fail a saving throw or ability check, you can ask the devil of your choice to give you a D10 to add to your roll. It's a once in a long rest ability, so nothing to write home about, but it's very flavorful and goes with the whole theme of the subclass, so points for that. Fiendish Resilience gives you just resistance to a damage type you feel like having, and you can change it every long rest and short rest. You can pick slashing, bludgeoning, or piercing damage from this, by the way, so it's even more powerful than you thought it was. And finally, Hurl Through Hell, which, what a name, is one of the funniest abilities ever made. What is it with early 5e and making unintentionally funny abilities? Anyway, whenever you attack a creature, you can choose to send them straight to Turbo Hell, Castiel style. That's right, you just send them there, free falling into hell for 6 seconds. No save for this, by the way, you just do this. At the end of your next turn, they come back and they are so scarred from whatever happened during those 6 seconds that they take 10d10 psychic damage.
Flames on the side of my face.
10d10, no save. This is up there with Way of the Open Hand for I touch you and you die abilities. 10 out of 10, very funny, tell another one. But what if the sugar daddy of your choice is not that scary lobster man from the Powerpuff Girls, but the most unknowable daddy of all? Well, the Great Old One is the subclass for you. This is your resident I Love Lovecraft subclass in the Warlocks roster of daddies. The Great Old One signifies a pact with an unknowable entity that lives outside of reality, impossible to perceive or understand. We're talking big eldritch vibes, cosmic horror, and tentacles being very possibly involved. A cool detail about the Great Old One patron is that it's so alien to mortals, hell, to most immortals in D&D world, and so impossibly alien that its motives are often truly incomprehensible. The patron might not even be consciously aware of the warlock at all, the pact being basically a byproduct of its existence. To the warlock, their pact has changed their life and forced them to perform completely unscrutable rituals, but the patron is so impossibly powerful and cosmically big that they might not even be aware of the warlock at all. Cthulhu is directly mentioned in the subclass description, so they are not shy about the inspiration. The Great Old One has some cool psychic themed spells like Dissonant Whispers, Detect Thoughts, or the obvious Everett's Black Tentacles for the sickos in the audience, and the abilities reinforce this with Awakened Mind, giving you telepathy, or Thought Shield.
Be gone, thought!
Not that spelling. And makes it so that if anyone deals psychic damage to you, they take the same amount of psychic damage back. Great Old One, like good Warlock subclasses, is very flavorful. But in terms of what Warlocks bring to the table story-wise, it runs into what every Cthulhu-esque narrative runs into. If your DM understands the assignment, you're not really gonna meet your patron, or talk with it, or actually learn its motivations. If you did, your brain will melt out of your skull or something. If you pick this, and your DM is actually familiar with how these guys work, you are basically relegated to only interacting with cultists for your patron, which is a bit sad for what a Warlock has to offer, but if you're picking Cthulhu as your sugar daddy of choice, you are probably 100% okay with this, so it's all good. And finally, for one of the weird ones, there's the Hexblade. The Hexblade is not particularly interesting in terms of lore, but the fun in it is that it's one of those subclasses that changes how Warlocks are played. The Hexblade patron is confusing. It's technically tied to the Shadowfell, although most people just completely ignore this side of the Hexblade, and they're right to do so, and make it about what actually matters. Your patron is a weapon made out of shadow, or whatever inscrutable Shadowfell lore they added to this, but a weapon. You have made a pact with a lawnmower, and now your lawnmower is gonna let you know exactly what you gotta do in exchange for being able to wield a cool lawnmower in battle. Hexblade makes the Warlock into a melee fighter, allowing you to hit with charisma? Somehow. Makes no sense, but we're gonna move on because it's cool. The big thing here is the martial aspect that the subclass brings. Not only is melee fighting possible to you now that you hit with your spellcasting ability, but you also get medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. You also get a cooler version of Hunter's Mark, because Rangers had it too good apparently, with Hexblade's Curse, where you select a guy that has looked at you funny and now you deal more damage to them. You crit on a 19 against them, and you regain hit points if they die. The Hexblade is basically screaming at you to pick back to the blade, and makes it that much better, with a ton of melee combat spells like a bunch of smite spells and stuff like shield. I love any subclass that completely changes how a class is played, so the Hexblade is a-okay in my book. But of course there are many other Warlock patrons. The Celestial Patron, the Genie,
You never had a friend like me.
and the inherent eroticism of the sea.
Take me, mommy.
Okay, so we have taken a look at Warlock abilities, we've taken a look at Warlock subclasses, and that's all well and good. So how about we give Warlocks a new twist? So I've been alluding to the whole Warlock issue throughout this whole video, and let me make one thing clear, actually two things. First clear thing, I love Warlocks. Warlock is probably, hell, scratch that, not probably, Warlock is to me the most conducive class to role-playing. Remember that fighter video I did? If you haven't, watch it, because Mr. Algorithm was not particularly kind to that one. In it, I talked about how fighter's biggest issue is that it's billed as the beginner class to play, but it does not help you at all coming up with interesting characters for it. Warlock is the opposite in that regard. It's hard to make an uninteresting Warlock, because even if you go for the most basic white bread version of it, Pact of the Fiend to gain more power, or whatever, the patron aspect of Warlocks gives DMs so much to work with. It's so easy to tie a Warlock into any campaign, and it comes prepackaged with not only an extremely interesting character dynamic between Warlock and Patron, but also a ton of potential NPCs for the Warlock. Not just the Patron, but other Warlocks that serve that same Patron. Are they working together? Are they competing for the Patron's favor? What about other competing Otherworldly patrons? It's a veritable mine for a DM to pull from. And despite that, I never play Warlocks. How can it be? How can this class that offers so many threads to pull from for roleplay and storytelling not be my favorite? Well, because I hate how Warlocks play, like mechanically. Let me explain. Warlock's issues gameplay-wise are, much like my talent, multifaceted and complex. The first and most obvious one is that Warlocks are the class that is the most reliant on short rest, and as we touched on the Baldur's Gate video, this is a generalized problem in 5e. The designers thought that people would be short resting much more than they are, so some classes rely on this, and this assumption was very, very wrong. Because people are not short resting as much as the designers thought they would, classes that rely on very frequent short rests are not getting those, which means that if you play play a Warlock and you want to use your spells at all, you either beg for a short rest when the rest of your party doesn't need one, which feels like ass and makes you feel like a liability to the team, or you won't beg for a short rest at all because you know that narratively you can't beg for one. The moment that you're doing anything time sensitive, short resting for a whole hour is just impossible. So you are either annoying or you are just not using your spells at all. Fortunately, or unfortunately if you ask me, the Warlock has an answer to this, and this is my biggest gripe with the class, believe it or not. The answer to this is Eldritch Blast. I understand I'm once again on the minority opinion here, so let me explain. I'm really not trying to be hot take master Pointy Hat here. This is truly a problem to me. Eldritch Blast is the strongest cantrip in the game for the simple reason that it deals 1d10 force damage. 1d10 is a lot of damage for a cantrip. It's the highest damaging cantrip at its baseline, but that's not why it's so good. First, it's because it does force damage, which is basically never resisted by anything, so it's extremely reliable. Secondly, it's because of how it scales. Most cantrips just add more dice to their damage. A cantrip that does 1d8 of damage does 2d8 of damage at 5th level, then 3d8 at 11th level, and so on. Eldritch Blast doesn't. Eldritch Blast adds another attack roll. This means that at 5th level, Warlocks make 2 separate attack rolls that each deal 1d10 force damage, for a total of 2d10. It sounds like there's no difference, but the difference is big. The difference here makes it so that you are just more likely to inflict some damage because you get more chances to hit, and you also get to choose to spread that damage to different targets. But the strength of Eldritch Blast does not end here, because the true issue with it comes with how it interacts with Eldritch Invocations. I told you we'll get back to it. So Eldritch Invocations are, in theory, what makes your Warlock unique. 2 Warlocks should, in theory, feel extremely different because they get to do wildly different things. There are Eldritch Invocations out there that allow you to see the aura of magic at will, or communicate telekinetically with your party members, or be able to read thoughts as much as you want, or read all writing regardless of the languages you know, except they don't. Because the best option you can ever take is to take any of the 3,000 Eldritch Invocations that empower your Eldritch Blast. Read anything on Warlocks Online and everyone will tell you to take Agonizing Blast as an Eldritch Invocation because it adds your Charisma modifier to each of your Eldritch Blasts. That's 2d10 plus 10 of potential force damage at level 5. And it's not just that one, you have stuff like Repelling Blast, which is also touted as the best Eldritch Invocation because it allows you to push the enemies you hit with Eldritch Blast 10 feet away. Each blast does this, and there's just no save to this. You just do this if you hit. At level 5, if you hit an enemy both times, you're pushing them 20 feet away. And if any of you have played Baldur's Gate 3, you know how strong of a strategy pushing people off a cliff can be. But even if there are no suspiciously available cliffs, you are basically forcing an enemy to dash to get to you if you do this, and it only gets better, or I guess worse, at higher levels. There are even more invocations that make Eldritch Blast stronger. There's one that gives it 300 feet of range, so you can spell snipe 360 no-scope from across the map. There's one that does the opposite of repelling, bringing them 10 feet closer. There's one that reduces their speed 10 feet for each blast. There's one that heals you when you score a crit. What? And there's one that allows you to cast Fireball as a bonus action with a hit? You gotta be kidding, what the f? Now, you may be sitting there going, oh, so your problem is that Warlock is overpowered? What are you, a League player? Which, first of all, how dare you accuse me of such a thing? Second of all, I liked Arcane and KDA a normal amount. And third of all, that's not what I'm saying. My problem is not that Warlocks are too powerful, it's that Eldritch Blast being so powerful and having the capacity to be even more powerful makes Warlocks dreadfully boring to play to me. The fact that you can cast 2 spells for the entirety of 90% of campaigns is not really a problem, because 9 times out of 10, you're not gonna be wanting to cast a spell at all. 9 times out of 10, the best option you have is to cast Eldritch Blast. Again, constantly, forever, every single turn. It doesn't matter how powerful it is, I find it dreadfully boring to do the exact same thing every turn. This point has been raised before, and the common answer is nobody's forcing you to pick those Eldritch Invocations. And my answer to this is simple. If you give me 20 choices, and of those choices, 1 is the clearly superior option, that is not a choice at all. If your answer to the problem of to play Warlock optimally, you have to play it boringly is don't play Warlock optimally, that's not an answer at all. I don't want to nerf myself and objectively be less useful to my team because a class is designed so that the most effective way to play it is to play it in the most boring way imaginable. Some people somehow make this about roleplay versus combat, and I dislike that implication so much. I guess this is a good spot to say this as any other, so I'll say it here. Being bad at combat doesn't make you good at roleplay. Being bad at roleplay doesn't make you good at combat. You can both be very into storytelling and roleplaying and still enjoy building and making a strong character that is good at combat. I deeply resent the implication that making a character that takes advantage of the abilities that a class offers somehow makes you worse at telling a story or at embodying a character. And conversely, I also think that making a character that is deliberately bad at being their own class somehow makes that character more interesting narratively. Regardless of this little soapbox I just got on top of, this is my main problem with Warlocks. I've tried them 1,000 times and I get either bored out of my skull or frustrated. Bored when I build one to be as strong as it can be and turn into an Eldritch Blast spam bot every fight, or frustrated when I know I could be dealing more damage and helping my party more, but I decided to take one of the cool and flavorful Eldritch Invocations instead. Now, before we move on to the fun part of this section, a little mention of a thing called multiclassing that sort of somewhat mitigates this. Warlock, and Sorcerer, but Warlock more than Sorcerer, is seen as the multiclass class. It's particularly well suited for multiclassing with stuff like Sorcerer and Paladin by virtue of being one of the 3,000 charisma base classes, and also by virtue of literally only needing charisma and not a secondary stat like dex or strength. Warlock abilities scale well in levels without needing specifically warlock levels, and wait, I'm gonna stop talking here because multiclassing is way less common than people think it is. If you run in D&D Reddit circle, F to you, F to me as well, I am also in that penance walk, you might think that everyone is out there sourlocking and lock-it-in around these D&D streets, but the fact is that very few players are actually theory crafting Eldritch Pale chatlogs to keep rismogging all intoids. I'm a poet. Bottom line, while the Warlock is useful in multiclassing, that's a niche and not reason enough to overcome the problems I have with it. If I tell you this class doesn't work for me and your answer to that is, that's because it's not meant to stand on its own, I don't think that's the gotcha you think it is. So, what do? In this show, we take a thing and we give it a twist, and it would be remiss of me to just complain and not do anything about it, despite that being what the internet is for. Well, we can't do much because the problems I have are literally baked into the class, and we're just gonna make a subclass, but we can do something. We want to keep what makes Warlocks cool, the roleplay opportunities baked into the class because of the relationship between Patron and Warlock, while fixing the Eldritch Blast issue. The Eldritch Blast issue is complicated to fix, but we can sort of fix the spell usage issue and the Eldritch Blast issue by giving Warlocks something that is an Eldritch Blast that would be a more attractive option for them to use than just spamming Eldritch Blast. Tall order, I know, seems complicated, and a lot of work. Oh god, it is a lot of work. Human Familiar, Warlock, now! Okay, so here's what I have. What if we take a page from the Half-Casters to help the Warlock with its over-reliance on Eldritch Blast? Especially, what if we look at Paladin for inspo? Paladin is another class with access to spells, but most of the time they are not using them in combat because they are busy smiting, sacrificing their spell slots for big damage. What about a Warlock that can transform their spell slots into something else to do in combat? Something that will change how the Warlock plays, like how Hexblade makes them melee combatants. What if this is an ongoing effect to make it useful for Warlocks and also different from Smite, which is once and done? This would be something that you use once, at most twice per battle, or once per short rest. It's not something you rely on for every turn, but something you want to keep for key moments of the combat. Warlocks don't need a subclass to fix damage for them. They have Eldritch Blast. We need a subclass that gives them something to do that isn't Eldritch Blasting. But we can't just ignore the best part about Warlocks, which is their roleplay potential. So what's the Patron for this? The problem here is that Warlocks have a lot of ground covered already. They have Fey Patrons, Celestial Patrons, Genie Patrons, Cthulhu Dads, and whatever the difference is between undead and undying. So what can it be? Hear me out. Dragons. Isn't it crazy that we don't have a dragon warlock yet? Dragons are basically the definition of extremely powerful magical being. Even a dragon not enjoyer like myself can see this is a massive hole in design. Dragons fit perfectly with the class, being these extremely long-lived, extremely powerful, extremely magical beings. We literally know they can have this effect on people because draconic sorcerers exist. What if a dragon could choose to have that effect on people instead of passing it down through the bard getting lucky? We've been talking a lot about this whole burn spell slots to trigger a state. That would help with the over-reliance on Eldritch Blast. What if this state was a draconic state? What if you could give yourself draconic characteristics? And if you're a good little warlock that does what their patron tells them to do and goes to bed on time and eats their vegetables, what if you could literally turn into a dragon, even for a short while? And all because of the gift given to you by your patron. But dragons have a ton of history with being good, evil, or anything in between. So you got plenty of options as to what the relationship with your patron could be. It doesn't have to be bad or good. Okay, that's enough theoreticals. Let's make a character based on this. Let's make a draconic warlock. The goblin speculates the reason he was abandoned as a child is simply because he was weak. Most likely born a runt. He was found alone as a newborn by a group of adventurers in the middle of a bog. They affectionately refer to the goblin as Bog Baby, thinking they'll soon find the tribe that lost him or a new home, but they found no tribe. And when the orphanage they visited refused to take him simply because he was a goblin, the adventurers made the unanimous choice to raise him, and the name stuck. Bog stayed with the party. The wizard taught him to read and write, the ranger taught him to light a fire and find shelter, and the fighter tried to teach him to fight. But as much as he tried, Bog could never get it right. He couldn't lift the sword, much less swing it. He could barely walk for 5 minutes before running out of breath, and any sort of physical exertion would cause him to break in a coughing fit. Despite his obvious physical shortcomings, Bog tried his hardest to make himself useful to his adoptive family. He carried the bag of holding and tried to contribute to fights with his slingshot as much as he could. Which wasn't a lot, but the adventurers always appreciated it. Despite life on the road being seen as many as particularly harsh, Bog did not mind. He was happy to tag along adventures, and no threat felt impossible to overcome as the party became stronger and stronger, besting each and every foe they encountered. Until they didn't. After whispers of some nefarious cult activity reached the party's ears, they decided to investigate, and this would prove to be fatal. When they reached the location they were told the cult had made their lair, they realized it was an ambush. As dark spells rained from above, the party turned towards Bog and told him to run. And Bog, filled with fear and powerless to do anything to help, ran. He ran until he could no longer hear the screams of his family behind him, and collapsed to the ground. He had felt powerless all his life, and now his weakness had made it so that he could do nothing but run when his family needed help the most. He wished with all his heart not to be as weak and as useless as he felt at that moment. And something listened. A dark winged figure reached from the heavens and landed before the young goblin, and a pact was forged that night under the full moon. Bog is now a draconic warlock, a servant to a powerful dragon and part of his horde. In exchange for Bog's service, the dragon promised great gifts, and the dragon delivered on that promise. Draconic magic, older than any other magics known to men, courses through Bog now. Channeling the gifts of his patron, Gob has not only made up for the shortcomings of his weak body, but exceeded every limit, being able to embody, even if for just a second, the true power of dragons. Most of his time, he travels alone on missions that his patron assigns to him, but he has a different goal: to find the cult that killed his family and make them pay. But what will Bog do when he finds out that the cult was a dragon-worshipping cult? None other than the same cult that he has joined now, forever in service to the dragon that ordered his followers to kill Bog's family. Oh, the drama, the intrigue, the Bog of it all. Give this guy high charisma for warlock powers, high dex because of goblin powers, and presto, you got yourself a goblin dragon. That's not something just any subclass can say, but at least the other subclasses can say they exist. This little draconic warlock subclass will have to live in the limbo of this little YouTube video you're watching. Oh, what's that? You would like this subclass? Well, how about this? Let's make a pact. I will put the link to the subclass for 100% certified free, and you leave a comment telling me what you would make a pact for. Yes, exactly, 100% certified free. And now that you have agreed to this pact, you are now under my command, you puny mortal. Anyway, the Dragon Otherworldly Patron subclass has been written to work with your normal D&D dragon. But man, wouldn't it be nice to have a dragon just for this subclass? You know, a warlock themed dragon? That'd be neat. In a completely unrelated note, here's the beginning of a series I just started that is all about making dragon themed after the classes. Would you look at that? What a coincidence. And here's the one we made right after that, a sorcerer dragon. Wow. I wonder which one is next. I guess we'll see. Bye! Mwah.